There he
Hey,
is.
there he is.
Here's
Cheers.
trouble.
Cheers.
Hello,
up, man?
everyone. How we doing? Good to see everybody. 6
rock
p.m. on the
tequila.
dot, and look at you fine folks already hanging out. I like it. Oh, yeah, Weston bringing the goods. I like it.
You smell
How we
what the
doing,
rock's
everybody?
cooking.
Dell is here. What is up, man? Haven't seen you in forever.
Oh, I made it back for one finally.
You made it back. I met Dell at the Let Love Inn here in New York City. That's old school right there. Good to see everybody. Look at all these fine folks here. Luke, what's up? Brett, Brock, Jeffrey, Jeff, John. Look at this fine crew. Joey the Jaguar not showing himself. I see how it is. Tyler staying invisible. I see how you guys are rolling. Just trying to hang out, stay incognito, but not really. I know what it's like. All right, what's on your minds, folks?
Got a haircut or not?
Oh, I'm never getting a haircut. I'm never cutting my hair again.
Let's not talk about hair, okay?
All right, John. We apologize. I apologize for the group in advance.
I don't have to go to the stylist, so there's.
I tell you what, the weather has changed 4 times in New York today. I've gone from
it was insane, man.
Gray, overcast to bright sun with a bit of clouds, and then all of a sudden it was a monsoon, and then it was nice again, and then it rained like not 20 minutes ago, and now it's sunny again.
I have both happening right now. Half of my lawn is raining and half is sunny.
We had that yesterday, except the rain was snow. I'm in Pennsylvania.
I saw.
I'm in Pennsylvania.
As all of social media told me.
Oh.
It was really good. All right, well, just shoot, guys. What's up? What's on your minds?
All right. I have a question.
Yes, I have an answer, hopefully.
Well, like in the early 2000s when Rodgers started, when they played the Cardinals in the playoffs and they choked, and when they played all the other playoffs and they choked, he had a bunch of weapons. He had Finley, Nelson, Jennings, Driver, and now we're complaining that he didn't get a wide receiver. It's like he had all the talent that he needed way back. They need a defense. They keep on choking with their defense.
So. I mean, look, and there is no doubt that there has been no one who has been more on board with what the Packers are doing this offseason than myself. There's no one who has said, look, we got to let it play out. But I understand the ire of Packers fans who do remember the teams you're talking about. And, yeah, they were able to move the ball up and down the field. They were deadly on offense. Their defense let them down repeatedly. But I understand the idea that Rodgers is now older. And we've seen him go down to injury a couple of times since then. And I understand Packers fans and even some media members wanting the idea of wanting to surround him with more talent on the offensive side of the ball so that he doesn't have to carry the load. Where I come down on that, though, is I think what Gutekunst did last offseason was make sure that Rodgers wouldn't have to carry the load. And, yes, could they have used another wide receiver? Yeah, probably. But to get an opportunistic defense like they had, a defense that for the most part kept them in all the games except for when they got run over in the NFC Championship game, that helps a quarterback. A running game helps a quarterback. And I think this draft class will keep going down that path, on a path that doesn't force the quarterback to have to be Superman, especially at an advanced age like Rodgers is getting to. So I totally understand where fans come from when they're bitching about that. It's not like I'm totally dismissive of that idea and that impetus, but I'm with you in the sense that, like, look, if we're talking about the totality of his career, let's not act like and that's where I took umbrage with some of the national guys. I think Mike Freeman and I had a back and forth where, this is shameful what they're doing to Aaron Rodgers. Give me a break. I mean, Ted Thompson did more for Aaron Rodgers than most GMs have ever done for their franchise QB, as far as giving them one of, if not the most elite offensive line for a stretch of his prime. Weapons galore. It's not like you can sit here and say the Packers franchise has let Aaron down in that regard. And that's where I kind of bristled. But for the most part, like I said, I get where fans are coming from there. Hello to the new folks chiming in. What's up, Luke?
What's up, man? How you doing? I'm just really excited for tight ends this year. I don't know. I'm really excited for the young bucks with the old vet. I don't know. I'm excited. That's all.
I mean, I am too. And it's funny because I got, again, another flame war yesterday on Twitter where people are like bitching about Josiah DeGuara being the third-round pick. And look, I get it. He's not a name that a lot of people linked to Green Bay before the draft. And the draft experts, quote unquote, who get way more wrong than they ever get right, are really down on that pick because of the positional value or the perceived positional value there. The ones I hate are you could have gotten him so much later. You have no idea of there's no way to know that. But I'm with you. I think you couple him with Jay Sternberger, and I'm not saying this is the blueprint. I'm not saying that, this is how they're going to use them, but they have the capability, they have the versatility to be the kind of attack that the Patriots had when they had Gronk and Hernandez. Their versatility, their ability to walk into the huddle, break the huddle, and have the defense have no idea if they're going to be seeing a power formation, if they're going to be seeing spread formation, if they're going to be seeing where those guys are going to be lining up, etc. And look, I think NFL offenses have been like this for a long time. You don't have to look much further than the Packers when they won the Super Bowl with Keith Jackson and Mark Chmura. This has been a staple on offense. When you get really athletic, versatile guys at that position, there's a reason it usually takes a year or two for even the best ones to acclimate to the NFL and become incredibly productive, because you are asked to do so much at that position, especially if you're going to be used the way it sounds like they want to use these guys. So I think, again, it's a long-term look. Gutekunst is looking down the road for how he wants these guys to develop with Matt LaFleur in this offensive system. And I think they'll be effective this year. I don't think we're going to see the true kind of breakout of their potential until next year, but they will certainly add something to the offense in 2020. I don't think there's any doubt there.
People like to say that Rodgers has never really had a good receiver tight end. Do you think he really just has never connected with one, and what they were trying to do with Graham and Bennett, or he's just never really had one?
Well, you mean a tight end, Joey?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he had one in Jermichael, and you heard a lot about Jermichael Finley you've heard a lot about him in the last couple of years when they've been trying to fix that, right? Whether it was Cook, whether it was when they went and got Graham, they were trying to find that receiving weapon at tight end. I think Jermichael's probably the best that he's had, the best that he's played with. And I think because of Jermichael's public persona, the stuff he does on Twitter, the way he is, he definitely struggled with drops at times. Those are the things that seem to color everyone's kind of remembering or how they remember Jermichael. But I'm telling you, man, he was insanely talented. And, Rodgers had some incredibly productive years with him at tight end. And I think they've kind of been chasing that ghost a little bit. I don't think they necessarily need that kind of player, but it sure seems like they've tried via free agency the last number of years to kind of replicate that skill set.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy that Gutekunst has cut his losses with Graham, doubled down at the position in the draft. And look, make no mistake, and I know this has been said on Twitter, but it's very true. If Jay Sternberger had come out this year, he'd be the tight end number one by far. So, when you think about, they didn't get him any receiving weapons. Yeah, they did. They got it last year in Sternberger. It just didn't play a whole lot for a number of reasons. But I think you're going to see that pick pay off big time in 2020.
Yeah, I really like the Love pick, actually.
Yeah? Why is that?
Well, I mean, like, quarterbacks
you think he's Mahomes light?
That's – I don't know. I don't know about the Mahomes comparisons, but I think they're pretty different. Like, I don't know. Like, Mahomes is, like, more of, like, a stocky, like, push, like, throws through the ground type of quarterback.
Right. Like the legs power through. Yeah. I feel you.
And Love seems to just kind of have, like, a whip of an arm right now.
That's true.
But I don't know. I'm okay with taking shots at quarterbacks, especially if one falls. Well, I guess they traded up for him a few spots, but technically falls to you. And then I'm really good with, like, everything we did on day 3. One of the strategies I like that Goody does is just hammer away at a position in like the lower rounds.
Yep.
Where got Jamal Williams, got Aaron Jones, and then Devontae Mays in one draft. And then Jamon Moore, Scantling, and EQ in the other. And then we just hammered away at offensive line in hopes that at least one could be a legit starter for a long time. Yeah, I kind of like that.
You got to think that you like the idea of – it's funny too because if you look at – for offensive line, they clearly have a history, right, of taking guys on day 3 and having them work. That has been just not even just recent thing, but that has been decades old in Green Bay. Now, that doesn't automatically mean they're going to hit on somebody, but their track record's pretty good there. With wide receiver, it's interesting because I understand – fans who have maybe not dismissed MVS, but they've certainly seemingly given up on him. I think he still has a shot to contribute, and EQ is a great unknown. But yeah, I'm with you in the sense that they've certainly kind of gone on a run at certain positions on day 3. Now, we asked about that, after the draft, and Brian, true to, form, at least publicly, that's how the board was, and we felt that was the best value for us at the time, blah, blah, blah. But I think I don't think it's a coincidence. I do think you look at, especially the way some of the contracts play out, you have to think there's a really good chance, especially after they re-sign Lucas Patrick, that those 3 selections probably spell the end for Corey Linsley in Green Bay, if only because, you can't continue to pay him if these guys can play, and we'll probably have a good idea of that by next year. So,
and I think the Dillon pick kind of spells like I don't think like Goody is going to feel super obligated to re-sign Aaron Jones at this point, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with letting Jones walk for whatever he can get, like on another team, because that's just like the way the running back market is.
It's definite insurance. There's no doubt. It's definitely insurance. I think I think they will be actively trying to re-sign him, though. I don't think they're just going to let him walk.
He's really, really productive.
I mean, that's the thing. It's the balance you got to strike, though, is he's so special in Green Bay's system. We've seen that for sure. One of the things that helped, though, is that he was available for every game, something that hasn't been the case throughout his career. And the reason he was available for every game is because they really were very judicious about, okay, you're going to get X number of touches. We're going to make sure Jamal gets worked in. Now this year you've got Dillon, who you got to think they're going to try and get on the field sooner rather than later. So I think that's the way they're going to try and sell to Jones and his people. Look, we know you're really productive. We know you make this offense go. This is obviously in the interest of both parties, and it's been reported that Aaron wants to stay in Green Bay. They are very much pushing for an extension. But I do think the Dillon pick absolutely tells Aaron Jones, look, we're happy to talk to you, but up to a point. We're not going to sit here and just overpay, especially given the way the market has worked for teams that have paid running backs. It has not been kind.
Yeah, I honestly didn't like drafting a running back. Like, it's not even like an A.J. Dillon thing, because I think A.J. Dillon could easily be a top 3 running back in this class.
Right.
But, I'm just not a big fan of drafting running backs in the second round.
The positional value thing, right? And I get that. And that's what the draft community hated. It's like, oh, you could wait till day 3, blah, blah, blah. But look, he could be the next Eddie Lacy in his prime.
Well, I was going to say.
And if they get Eddie Lacy in the second round, I'm happy.
I was going to say, even if he becomes Brandon Jacobs, who just turns it on in January, I'd be okay with that.
And is plowing through defenses into the end zone in cold weather. I'm down.
Brandon Jacobs. That's my line where if he can be Brandon Jacobs, fine.
I'd be totally down with that.
Has anybody heard anything? They had this virtual camp. Did anything come out of that?
Oh, it's just this, man. It's just Zoom meetings. They're literally just sitting there with coaches, and they're their position groups, their position rooms. Like the wide receiver room is just a Zoom call like this, and they're going through installations. They're going through schematic stuff. It's basically their meetings that they would be having normally. The only thing that they're not doing in-house or with the team that they would be normally doing at this time of year is weight training. That they are tasked with doing on their own. And some of the guys I know have had guys like from who live in the area have had supervised kind of deliveries of weight equipment and stuff, and supervised visits from Packers staff come to their home, set it up, blah, blah, blah. So it's all like the way they want it to be. But obviously there are tons of guys who are not in the area and are remote, and the Packers have given them, here's a list of the vendors you should use and what kind of equipment we want you to get, blah, 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 to try and replicate as close as possible as what they would have at 1265 Lombardi. But for the most part, this is what they're doing. They're having Zoom calls. They're going through their schematic stuff and their installs, and then they're on their own for weight training. Which is funny. It'll be funny to see I don't remember who it was. Somebody just said it on Twitter the other night. It's going to be very noticeable which guys were on it when it comes to the training and which guys were definitely slacking off.
Eggs, do you think Za'Darius might be suspended for the first couple weeks, including like the game in Minnesota?
There's an outside chance.
I hope not.
I've obviously hope not, but it's certainly a possibility given the traffic stop and everything. Who knows? The NFL wheels of justice are slow and weird and seemingly incredibly arbitrary. So he could, absolutely be suspended. We could get traditionally that stuff comes out, I think, right before July 4th weekend. The NFL likes to drop it. So maybe we'll hear by then. Maybe we'll get to the season and not even hear anything about it till later in the year. That's my hope anyway. But yeah, there's absolutely a possibility that could come down this offseason.
Oh, Gary just has to stack Cousins 3 times then.
Yep, I'm down with it. Nothing wrong with that.
Speaking of Gary and Za'Darius, do you see them kind of rotating more on the defensive line now that we're kind of banking on our in-house talent? Like
have to be, right?
I see them doing half and half. Like they both have experience playing on the line, and they can also do outside linebacker. So at any given moment, they can flip-flop. They got that versatility. That's kind of like our I think that's how Gary gets on the field more, I think, in year 2 is kind of sharing that end spot with Za'Darius. So
he might end up just playing with his hand in the dirt too.
Director games, so.
Sort of
there's no doubt when Brian had his end of year press conference, he was asked, how do you plan on getting him on the field more? How do you see him? Do you see him strictly as an outside linebacker? And he said he's basically Za'Darius 2.0. That's their plan for him. So you got to think they have to get those guys on the field together, because you can't simply have him as Za'Darius's sub. There's no way, especially since he was the 12th overall fucking pick. I do think you're going to see a lot of those guys kind of mixing and matching, bouncing in and out. You may even see, a quote-unquote NASCAR package, to make a callback to the old Dom Capers days, where you have 4 pass rushers on the field. And I know Pettin did some of that last year, but I think you'll definitely see, Preston, Za'Darius, Gary, and then whoever else they deem worthy of that 4th spot. They'll definitely be bringing guys in waves, but they'll also look to try and get them on the field at the same time. And I don't think there's any question you don't just want to peg Gary as a guy who is a rotational guy. You want to work him into a majority of your packages. I think, you've got to get him on the field. The only way he's going to improve and or develop is by playing. And you can't develop on the sideline. So, yeah, I think that's a good problem for the coaches to have, but it is definitely their problem.
That's one thing I think is really interesting about Goody's picks is that, like, with Gary and Love, those are both very controversial picks. But if you think about it through the perspective of you're that player, there's, like, not a better place to be drafted. Like, if you're,
no doubt.
If you're Jordan Love and your problem is you're throwing a lot of picks, you can sit behind the guy who's the best at not throwing picks. If you're Sean Gary and your problem is you're an athletic freak that, hasn't really produced.
And is changing positions.
Yeah, right. You're behind Za'Darius, who is a guy who came up through JUCO, didn't really know football, was a basketball player all the way through high school until the last year. Super raw talent, but it was there. And
you saw him come on as his 4 years in Baltimore, definitely. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the pressure then obviously switches. Instead of your pressure being there immediately because you're a rookie and you're expected to produce, now your pressure is, well, you didn't do shit last year. You better explode onto the scene in year 2. It's different types of pressure, and it's fine. These guys are under pressure each and every day, but it certainly puts a bullseye on a pick like Gary. If you're taken in the top 15 and say you get to, let's say week 5 or 6 of your second season and you're not producing, I mean, forget playing, because he better be playing. But if he's playing and not producing, man, I mean, I think it's fine, because who knows? There are tons of reasons why guys don't put up stats, as long as they're affecting the pocket, blah, blah, blah. But if he's not productive, that chorus, that vocal minority is only going to get louder, and it's going to be annoying as hell. But hey, like you said, as far as their development as a player, there's no question you're in a perfect spot. I said this all last year. I mean, talk about a perfect place for Gary to land as far as sitting behind 2 incredibly productive pass rushers who never come off the field. Well, yeah, you don't have to play. We don't need to count on you. But that's got to change this year. There's zero question.
Aaron, do you see them moving on from Williams? If
Steven, I'm sorry. What's that?
I'm sorry.
Steven, go
I was
ahead.
just wondering, with all the plethora of wide receivers drafted this year, don't you think that maybe these players slipped down? And I think they're really worth the value they're worth. When I see these guys said nobody gave Rodgers any help. I mean, after the draft, it looked like they were comparing us to the Cleveland Indians in Major League. Who the hell are these guys? But which, by the way, I was in that movie, which was a blast.
I was too.
Yeah,
I'm on the third base line on County Stadium.
And I was the first base coach for the Yankees.
No, you did not. No, you didn't.
Oh yeah, I did. I'm in there. The guy that first base was supposed to be me. When they had the tryouts at Miller Park at Washington Park, I was the first guy to make the cut as a first base, and Johnny Logan was there, and I threw a ball to third base. And he said, "You're it." And the media came up, and I got some fun stories.
Amazing.
I hung around with Vukovic, man. He's a riot and a half. But
I don't doubt it. But yeah, man, I'm with you. I understand. We talked about it right at the start of the call, but I understand the kind of knee-jerk reaction of it, right? Because, and this is what I always preach, the draft industrial complex really greases the rails for that kind of thing. And look, I get it's entertainment and people are entertained by it. Hell, we produce a draft guide for CHTV because people love it. I get it. You'll notice I don't do a whole lot for it because that just ain't my gig. But yeah, I get it, man. People get excited about all these names, and they watch the highlights, and they want them on their team, and then it doesn't happen. And it's like, oh, you're not doing anything for Rodgers. Give me a break.
The only team I think everything fell to is Baltimore. They just sat there, and everybody was there. Yeah. Was like the golden spot.
But I love that, though, because then, okay, everybody fell to them, but it's everybody that, you heard about before the draft. So then, the Ravens had a great draft. Well, yeah, because they did everything that you read about prior to the draft. That doesn't mean they had a great draft. Can we let it let it play out? You just go back and look at the draft grades 3 years on.
Everything?
It's just annoying. But I get it. I always say, you just got to let it play out. And people accuse me of being all, oh, you think it's going to be amazing. Come back next year when it's not. And I'm like, oh, I don't sit here thinking or telling people it's going to be amazing. But I am more than willing to say I really hope it works out because I'm a fan of the fucking team. And I really want it. I'm really rooting for it. But I'm also smart enough to know I have no idea if it's going to work out. Unlike
but the pieces
90% of the people on television.
The pieces they got fit. Don't you think the pieces they got fit exactly what they needed?
Precisely. And the problem is and this is the pushback you get a lot from their draft, is the positional value thing, especially on day 2 with taking a running back and then taking an H-back. people, the immediate pushback is always, you could have got them later. It's like, A, no, you have no idea if they could have gotten them later. And B, this idea of, just drop back, just trade back. Well, it takes two to tango. And just picking up a phone and making a call and saying, we're going to trade back, that's not how it works. So they have talks each and every minute of each and every round with so many other teams. Brian, or who was it? John Schneider told the story of how they were the Seahawks were literally on the phone. Schneider was on the phone with Gutekunst in the first round. They had a deal in place for the Packers to get up to the Seahawks spot. And then the Colts came in with a better offer, and Gutekunst literally said, got a better offer. And they went with the Colts. That happened live. So, this idea that, you just call it and make it happen. No, it takes two to tango. And there are a million different things going on throughout the draft to facilitate whether that happens or it doesn't. So,
do you know if some GMs just kind of have a grudge against each other and refuse to kind of do business with them, or is it just kind of business is business? If the deal's good enough, you'll do business with any one type of person. I've always wondered that. What's the relationship? When they call on these.
Yeah, there are certainly guys who have, professional histories with guys, personal histories with guys. It's like any other gig, really, in the sense that you'd much prefer to work with someone you like and or know.
Yeah.
Look no further than the fact that Gutekunst was talking to Schneider. That would have been the third year in a row they traded in the first round.
Yeah, that's what asked me to ask that.
That's an obvious pipeline, right?
Schneider, so yeah.
But I mean, that's just that's the obvious. That's greases the rails for communication, etc. There are tons of times you'll hear about guys who don't like each other who do a deal just because it makes sense for both sides. I mean, ultimately, if you are the kind of GM who does hold grudges and refuses to work with people, you're going to miss out on deals, you're going to miss out on talent, and you're going to be out of a job. So I think ultimately most of the guys who reach the GM level, they're too good at, for the most part, they're too good at recognizing value and recognizing talent to let something like a personal grudge get in the way. But that's, again, you can't say it's 100% because it isn't.
Dealing with humans,
for the most part.
Yeah.
For the most part. Hey, Luke has his hand up. So, Luke, what's up, buddy? I like people who put their hands up. My dad's a school teacher, so it's been ingrained in me.
Yeah. Hey, I figured. So I took a little trek down memory lane, and I watched the 2011 season recently this past week, and I was actually just kind of wondering. And I did it because it was so fun just watching our offense. I mean, they were just cooking with gas. And it goes back to that Aaron Rodgers never has any weapons. Well, they were damn good. So the core that he had then were pretty good. But that drop off in defense was just crazy to go from the Super Bowl team that was this top 5 defense to a defense that had ball hawks. I mean, Charles Woodson was insane. They did great things, but every game almost felt like a shootout. Everyone scored
because it was
plus games on us, points on us. And I just don't understand where was the big drop off, for what reason other than Nick going down. I couldn't figure it out.
It's two things. It was Nick going down, and I think, wasn't that the year that they let Jenkins walk? I could be off on my years, but ultimately it happened up front because they drafted – it may have happened throughout that year, but they drafted Worthy, and he had promise early, and they were really banking on him, but then he hurt his knee, and he was never the same. It's never any one thing, but I mean, Nick was the catalyst because then that opened up the door for the MD Jennings of the world to make an appearance, and obviously that was a couple years later, but that was the ripple effect. For the most part, I think it was twofold. It was losing Nick and then not being able to control things up front the way they had the year prior, especially down the stretch that year. Because don't forget, people like to make a lot of the fact that, Rodgers and the offense, and you remember the Atlanta playoff game, but I don't think any game was more than a 7 or 10 point difference throughout the entire season in 2010. And then you get to 2011, and like you say, it's like these massive shootouts, and the defense certainly couldn't hold up its end of the bargain for the most part. But yeah, to me, those were the two kind of key factors, although there's always a million different things.
Aaron, I like the fact that the Major League Baseball is doing their possible season starting in July, maybe work out the kinks and all the issues of the stadiums and such. I think it's good for football if it happens.
Yeah, I agree. And I know I saw MLB put together their kind of idea for a package proposal today. They're supposed to speak with the union tomorrow. You guys know I would not be paying attention to baseball at all outside of listening to Bob Uecker if it didn't have anything to do with football. But because of the fact that I totally agree, John, there's a good chance that if they can succeed in getting anything, even resembling a season off the ground. And from what I saw reported, I think it was, I can't remember who it was, but somebody had the initial report of the 70-game season, how they wanted to kind of approach it. Man, I think that's a real pie in the sky kind of idea. And I'm sure that's probably a starting point. I would think the players union would go about whittling that down a little bit. Because, look, you saw the pushback today when Peter King published his thing with Dr. Fauci about, the virus will dictate and blah, blah, blah. And I don't doubt that's true. But there are some insanely powerful economic factors at hand here that are going to be pushing for the NFL to play. Now, if it's without fans, which I think is a very good chance, especially early in the season, that remains to be seen. But I think baseball, like you said, will undoubtedly, if and when they get something together, whatever it happens to be, because I don't think they're going to punt on the season. But whatever it is going to be intensely studied by 345 Park and all the teams in general. No question.
Because I'm like you with baseball, I don't follow it at all. I'm glad they get to figure this out.
Exactly. Well,
So
that's
the
kind of the
NFL
weird
doesn't
part
have to-
about this offseason, right? Like, it's so crazy how, 2 months ago we were sitting here watching the NBA and baseball was just getting done with spring training, and also a couple weeks later it was all shut down. But for football fans, it's like, okay, it's still we've had free agency, we've had a draft, albeit virtual, but it was the draft. We know the draft. So we're sitting here with a lot of unknowns when it comes to what camp will look like. You got to think there's a good chance it probably won't even happen in any kind of real sense. But for them, if they're on track and they get to the season and they at least play the games, even without fans in the stands, NFL fans of all the sports pantheon, we've been okay. Like, we've, crossed your whatever, but it's kind of just a normal off season outside of the fact that there haven't been other sports to take our minds off stuff.
It was an interesting conversation. I think I heard it on the NFL Network. If there's no fans in the stands,
that's impossible. What you just said is impossible. There was an interesting conversation on the NFL Network. Come on. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I have lots of friends there. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
They were talking about basically a lot of the things that our players and coaches are yelling and communicating will now be clearly heard all the time if there's nobody in the stadium. And be interesting to see what kind of dynamic that brings to it, because
I don't expect Belichick to take advantage of that at all.
hand signals and I don't know.
All of that. Well, here's the thing though. I got to think if and when they determine how they want to go about it, if it is without fans, you got to think there's some kind of adjustment to how they broadcast the game. I got to think they'll probably pump in crowd noise, because it would be beyond weird to hear it in complete silence. But even if they don't, to your point, I would be shocked if the PA allowed the broadcasters to continue to utilize all of the mics and like Zoom mics and the mics on the center that picks up all the line calls, etc. Because there's nothing else to drown it out. You're going to hear a lot of extraneous stuff that we haven't before. You're going to hear F-bombs galore. Like, it's just going to be. I just can't imagine that they would allow that kind of invasive environment. But we'll see. Yeah, who knows? It's the NFL. We'll see.
Maybe they'll shoot it like they shot North Dallas 40.
You're dating yourself there. You're dating me too, Stephen. So. But yes, it's possible.
I haven't missed a Packer game since 59, so 60.
There you go.
I'm sorry, 1960. So.
Man after my own heart. Dell, what's up, man? Dell, you were trying to talk before. What's up?
I was just wondering if Dylan really hits the ground running, pun intended. Do you think Williams has any value as like a trade candidate, or do you think they just cut him? Or
you mean during the season?
Well, if there is a camp. Dylan really hits the
I would
ground
have
running,
thought.
and they like what they see, but
I think they'll keep all three guys. I really do.
So-
If someone, comes along and makes them an offer for Williams because he is entering the last year of his deal, and you got to think if there's a guy they're going to re-sign, it's going to be Aaron Jones. Maybe I think they'd listen, but who's making that offer? In this world where you listen to everybody around the league, backs are a dime a dozen. He literally was drafted on the third day. I can't. Now, he's proven himself. He's clearly an effective back. He could be a starter in the league, I think. Got great hands, great pass protector, etc. I just can't imagine a team, unless there is the one caveat there, obviously, is unless there's an injury. But how can there be an injury if there's no camp? That's where I think it really kind of plays into the Packers keeping all three of them, because I just don't think there's going to be much physicality this offseason. So there's not going to be this rash of
picked up by the
injuries.
Vikings.
Don't put that into the universe, man. Nobody wants to see Jamal all swaggy after a touchdown
Dancing
in a
on the
Vikings
sideline.
uniform. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody needs that in their life. Tyler, buddy.
Do you know any good
shouting out
defensive?
hold on. Tyler's shouting out the last day at Lambeau. I saw someone that tweeted at you today. That's old school. Everybody on the beat was involved in that back in the day about Favre's.
I just finished it. Baby Tom Pelissero. That's hilarious.
Baby Tom Pelissero. Yeah.
That is hilarious.
Lori Nickel. Yeah, I was asked to be in it actually, but we could never make the logistics work because they were in Wisconsin, I was in New York, and I wasn't going back home anytime soon. But that is a really cool viewing. Last day at Lambeau.
Check it out. That's good. It's hilarious, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Some of the similarities between things that are being said.
You don't say. Oh,
You
really?
don't say, but no. you can't say that.
Interesting how that works, right?
Apparently, Aaron Rodgers was #1 overall pick who just happened to slide to us, which may or may not be true. But
right.
Well, he slid to everyone, and everyone passed him. So.
Exactly, but that's the point. Exactly. Well,
That's the point.
my favorite
Because Ryan
story.
said Joey Harrington, they had the
He
quarterback.
should change one of the audibles for the Vikings game to empty trophy case. So if it gets picked up by the mics,
I
There
love
you
it.
go.
I love that idea. Oh my God, that's so good. What my favorite story of the Rodgers fall was years later. A couple years later. Was it Rodgers who told it? But somebody said that John Gruden looked Aaron Rodgers in the eye and said, "If you make it to 12, we're taking you." And then they took Cadillac Williams instead, and then suffered in quarterback purgatory.
I tell
blah,
you
blah, blah.
what, man, that Cadillac
That is-
Williams, man.
That is the ultimate Gruden move. I love that.
I'll tell you what, though, Rodgers being booed on family night, that was depressing.
I was there.
That was depressing.
That was literally my oldest daughter's first time ever at Lambeau Field. She was wearing an Aaron Rodgers jersey, and everyone was booing him. And then Brett showed up.
Yes.
Brett came into his box. Dude, I got it. That was the most surreal I've ever seen Lambeau Field. Like it was that
It was
night.
like stormy that night. It was stormy.
It was sort of, and Brett literally landed at the airport, and it rippled through the crowd. And then he showed up in his box, and then Aaron's getting booed. I'll never forget. He threw it past a Donald Driver that kind of got tipped, and I think it got intercepted, and people just lost their shit. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This kid is the future. And you're like sitting here like, it was like Twitter come to life, basically. It was just, that whole night was surreal. And I'll never forget because my daughter was there wearing the Aaron Rodgers jersey. It was her favorite player in the whole world. And she's like, why are they booing him? I'm like, it's all right, honey. He's not having a great practice. But what's weird, though, is that, like, every time since that night, whenever Favre's in the house, Aaron does not have his best game. Whether he's playing against Brett, whether Brett's coming back to be honored, anything. Anytime Brett's in the house and has, like, the focus on him, Aaron doesn't play well.
Repressed memory.
I never noticed that.
It's weird. It's weird. It's true, though.
I was
I believe-
at that game, the retirement when they retired his number.
Oh, the Thanksgiving one?
Yeah, with the Bears, and it was raining.
The rainy
and
night?
It was like,
God, that was an awful.
it was like
When
raining at like 40 degrees.
Adam Gase ate Dom Capers' lunch that night. That was ugly.
You told the story on train.
And Devontae wasn't Devontae had a really bad game as far as drops go.
Everybody had a bad game. What was that, Joey?
You told the story on transplants once about your dad, and it reminded me of mine. I think it was after the Seahawks game where he just went. He couldn't watch the game. He said it wasn't too much. And my dad, he's in the Zoom call right now. I think he has not watched a night game in the last 5 years. He goes to bed at like 6 every night, and he says,
Right.
I can't take it from my heart.
Yeah, that was definitely my dad this year. The Vikings game on, I think it was a Christmas Eve night or the night before. It was 23rd, I think. Yeah, my dad literally. I'm watching it in the living room. I'm home. I'm in Wisconsin. I'm like, we watch a Packers game together. My dad is literally in the other room reading a book. I'm like, what are you do? Like, what are you doing? He's, I can't take it. So of course I'm me, and I'm watching the game, and I'm like, yeah, woo, I'm going crazy, whatever. And so then my dad peeks his head around the corner, like, oh wait, what's the score? You know, I'm like, oh, it's, I think it was like 10-9 or whatever, right before half, and he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to bed. I'm like, you're going to bed? What are you, crazy? He's like, no, I got to go to bed. I can't take it. So then literally he goes upstairs. I think it got to the fourth quarter. Of course, I lost my shit when Aaron Jones had the big run at the end of the game for the touchdown to kind of seal it. And I hear my dad come back down the stairs. Oh, what happened? What happened? I'm like, Dad, I thought you were going to bed. So
The Hail Mary in Detroit, me and my brother were downstairs going crazy. He comes down and just –
That was a great night. That was a great – there's out there somewhere there's a vine of me losing my mind after that Hail Mary. But, yeah, vine tells you – where it was in the pantheon of the internet.
I have one more question before it's over.
Yeah.
If Pet or defense coordinator, brain farted, what his name is?
Mike Pettin. Yeah.
Mike Pettin. If he doesn't do well and they screw up again in playoffs and their defense is struggling, do you know any good defensive coordinators that take his position? And what kind of defensive scheme would you like to see? What kind of defensive scheme would you like to see?
You know what? We're a long way away from that. There's nothing that I'm opining for at the moment. I would say I'd like to see a switch to a more, I don't know, it's hard to say aggressive because everybody talks about aggressiveness, etc. The four-man down lineman is fine. I don't care. 3-4-4-3, I don't care. I would just like to see a little bit more physicality at the line of scrimmage across the board. I don't care what the scheme is. I don't care, but the idea of we'll allow our defensive backs to determine whether they play press man. We'll allow, the safeties to determine, whatever the angle is they need to take, and they got to play mop up instead of being attack oriented and attack minded. That to me is the biggest kind of difference between. You look at a team like the 49ers, the Ravens, or some of these teams that really kind of come up and clean your clock at the line of scrimmage. And aren't afraid to do it. And they play lots, especially the 49ers. Now, obviously, they're helped by the fact that they had a decade of drafting in the top 10, so they got a bunch of really talented guys up front, capped off by Bosa, so that allows them to be really simplistic on defense and knock you at the line of scrimmage because they know, for the most part, if your quarterback holds the ball, he's dead. So I get that. But I just like a little bit more physicality up front because this passiveness, and that's not even just Pettin, but going back to Capers, it has been this like, okay, we're just going to let guys give them 5-8 yards of cushion. It drives me nuts. So to me, that's the one kind of big change I'd like to see. Brock, you've had your hand up. Thank you, sir. What's up, buddy?
Yeah. So you were talking about how you don't see a lot of physicality coming during the off season. Do you think that'll lead to a spike in injuries come game day? Just not having that practice and muscle memory there?
I think there's a good possibility. If only because we've seen it before when they've had not just the Packers, but like the NFL. You go back to 2011 after the lockout. I don't think there was a huge spike, but you definitely noticed a few more soft tissue injuries, right? Now, you probably didn't notice in Green Bay because that's all they ever had under Mike McCarthy. But I think around the league you saw, I don't think it was like blown out knees or anything like that, but you definitely saw a few more hamstrings, things of that nature. And I do think, again, as we talked about a little bit before, I think there's no question that you're going to see who was actually diligent about working out every day, who was putting in the work in regards to their own workouts and that's not just weight training. That's stretching. That's keeping your body right, etc. Whether it's your diet, whether that's your flexibility. That is, you are a professional athlete, and you got to prove the professional part through the next 4 months, right? But I don't think I'd be surprised if the offseason plays out like we think it will. Yeah, I'll be very surprised if we don't see a bit of an uptick in as far as like those types of injuries. Context, what's up, buddy?
So a little player by player comp on this one. I was watching some old game footage from the early 2000s the other day, and Nick Barnett was just kind of popping up off the tape for me. And then I started watching
Good old Nick Barnett,
and I was watching some Kirksey footage, and their play style seemed kind of similar to me. I know a lot needs to happen, and it might not be the most fair of like comparisons, but can you see kind of Kirksey fulfilling kind of like a Nick Barnett as like a ceiling type level? And if so, what could a player like that do for Pettin's defense, you think, going forward, having a player of that magnitude?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's a pretty apt comparison. I would hesitate to say that's his ceiling. I think he could be better than Barnett was. That's provided that he hits the ground running and is back to where he was trending prior to his last 2 injuries. That's a tall order. I mean, you never know how guys are going to come back. You never know what they're going to look like. But I think he's a little bit more athletic than Nick was. And I like Nick a lot. I think he was a good player for the Packers. I don't think he was a great player. But I think Kirksey could be – I don't want to say the difference for Green Bay. I don't want to say he's going to, like, turn them around, so to speak. But I do think, especially given Blake's comments to the New York media when he was – his first initial comments when he talked about how he was told to just clean up after the Smiths, right? And that caused headlines for a day or two. But, hey, if Kirksey's asked to do the same thing, I think he's going to be a much better janitor than Blake. I think his athleticism, is faster. I think his ability to diagnose, from what I've seen. Now, we're looking at old tape from a couple years ago before he was injured. But from what I've seen, he recognizes shit a lot better than Blake ever did. And his ability to diagnose stuff, not take false steps, know where to be. And if he sees Smith crashing inside, he's going to instinctually go outside, knowing that stuff's going to kick out. Rather than, I think Blake really got caught a lot of times watching the ball, trying to determine what was about to happen, rather than, knowing what was going to happen. Now, he's not a Jedi. He's not going to fucking, just appear where he's supposed to be. But I do think that's where he could potentially really surpass what Blake brought. And I think that's where he could be better than Barnett was. Because I think Nick struggled with the same kind of thing. But, yeah, I think it's funny. The play style, I think you're right. I think they're similar in the sense that I think Nick used to do a really good job of getting through the wash, as they call it. Here's a bunch of offensive linemen and defensive linemen causing havoc. Nick had a really innate ability of getting through all that and getting to the ball carrier. And I think, Kirksey could be very similar.
Early impressions seem to indicate he's probably a better locker room fit for that group as well, from what I've just seen from his interview.
I mean, hell, everybody in Cleveland loves him. There's no question. And you've seen the little snippets we've gotten on social media, which, we always got to take that with a grain of salt. But there's no question he seems to be the kind of guy they want to bring in.
Not that Blake was, a distraction or like
no, of course not
anything, but like he didn't really come off as like a leader. He was just kind of like a come in, do your job, and go home type of guy. Whereas Kirksey kind of, gives off a little bit of a Za'Darius vibe a little bit.
That is a very good description of Blake, and that comes from people inside the locker room.
Yeah,
Nathan, what's up, buddy?
Sorry.
So one thing I've been thinking about, and this might be a little like tin hattish, is
here we go. Here we go. Bring the tin hat. Bring it.
The only teams to not draft a receiver in this last draft were the Patriots and the Packers. Now, could they be playing the board so that next year, when there's another very strong, there's supposed to be
wide receiver class,
maybe not as many, but a lot of really strong receivers next year, with every other team having drafted at least one, sometimes two, sometimes three receivers, will the other teams go on need and then you see like the Jamar Chases of the world drop to the 20s, and the next bunch of receivers that are first round caliber drop into the second round, and then they just make better deals for themselves next year.
I'll tell you. I'll just say this. I love the idea that Brian Gutekunst and Bill Belichick are playing 4D chess while the rest of the league is doing need-based drafting. That would make me sleep better at night, and I would love to laugh at other franchises throughout the years because of it. However, last year we heard all sorts of, I don't want to say reporting, but we saw a lot of opining about the idea that, one of the reasons Brian didn't go out and trade for a wide receiver, he came close. They almost got Robbie Anderson. But one of the reasons he didn't make that move was because of the depth of this wide receiver class. And then you fast forward to this wide receiver class, and he doesn't take a wide receiver. And I buy him. I take him at his word that it's just how the board fell. The problem with the idea of you're trying to like think ahead to the next draft class is you might not be employed. Yes. Does Brian have relative security in Green Bay? Absolutely. No question about it. But it is a not for long league. It is a very much what have you done for me lately league. And if they have a disastrous year, well, then he's stuck having to do the drafting for need thing because he's got to produce right away, rather than this draft is definitely about setting up long-term success. Is it a possible, thing they talked about? Yeah, there's no doubt they talked about it, but I don't think it's a designed plan.
It didn't force their decision.
No. Luke, what's up, buddy?
What's up, man? Hey, just real quick about the Kirksey thing. I live in San Diego and became really good friends with Micah Hyde. He lives out here. And played golf
what's
with
up,
Kirksey.
Micah?
Oh, he's such a good guy.
Dude, Micah's wedding here in New York is like legendary.
Yeah.
Legendary.
He's a really good guy. But I played golf with Kirksey like a couple years back and became friends with him. And stand-up guy. I'm so excited that he's a Packer.
Awesome.
True gentleman off the field, and I just can't wait. That's all.
That's the impression. That's the impression I get. I can't wait to see him, man. I can't wait to talk to him. Luke, what's up, buddy?
Hey, I was going to ask. So my wife and I, we travel around and see different stadiums every year, and we've seen a handful of them already. But I was wondering, have you seen most of the other stadiums out there? I don't know how much you traveled in and out your time reporting on the Packers. And are there any that you'd recommend that were just a really fun stadium to go to outside of Lambeau, of course, but just when traveling?
Right. Well, I've been to most of them at this point. Between the time I've covered the team and worked for Sports Illustrated, between that, I've been to most of them, I want to say. I can't think of any that I haven't been to. I will say the best vibe is probably in Kansas City, which obviously they went to last year.
That's where we were last year.
That's like the vibe there is just, it's like Green Bay in the sense that it's all day. It's small. It's close knit. I think Cleveland's similar in that regard. Yeah, I don't know. Outside of that, like Washington's terrible. Jacksonville's god awful. Tennessee, the actual stadium experience is abysmal, but everything around the stadium is awesome. So it's still a good trip. Those are the ones that leap to mind.
Cool. Thanks.
Weston, what's up? I got time for one or two more.
Did you think of I was looking at Quarles, how he played for the Packers, and it kind of reminded me of the tight end that we drafted.
DeGuara?
Quarles, yeah. He reminded me because Mike McCarthy would have him in the backfield and the kind of like H-back would come out.
I think the way they utilize him may be similar, but I think DeGuara is a lot more athletic, and I think he'll be a much better player. But I hear you in regards to how Mike used to move Quarles around. I think I did a blog post about this ages ago, kind of looking at how Mike used to move tight ends around the formation and try and not trick, but basically cause doubt in the minds of defensive coordinators. And I think Quarles was used in that way, but I think DeGuara will be a much more explosive weapon down the line.
I'm a Penn Stater, and he better be better than Quarles. Okay, I went out and I got myself a Quarles jersey because I thought maybe he was going to become.
Oh no!
Then he shot a gun in Miami.
He did He did shoot a gun on the 4th of July or the morning of the night before the 4th of July. I'll never forget that because I was upstate at a friend's place and I had to get out my fucking laptop and do a blog post because Quarles couldn't keep it in his pants.
Do you think Clay Matthews will come back to the Packers on a vet minimum as an inside linebacker?
No.
Dell, what's up, buddy?
What do we got to do to get Banky on one of these, man?
He actually came on the last minute of the last one I did. Last
Oh,
week.
I missed it.
But he was only here to tell me that I had to do something for linebackers. So we'll definitely get him on and mark your calendars because this is still very preliminary. So write it in pencil. But Packer transplants back on May 27th, Wednesday evening. So we're tentatively scheduled for a live Packer transplant on the YouTube channel, and we may have a very special guest, although I'm not confirming anything. But
Cool. Thank you, Robo
it'll be
Aaron.
a lot of fun.
Would it be Aaron Rodgers?
Thank you.
We'll see. Now that he knows who I am. No.
Matt LaFleur.
No, I can tell you right now, it will not be Aaron Rodgers. All right, guys. I'm gonna have to go. Can't thank you guys enough. Thank you so much for hanging out. And thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being patient at CHTV. You guys are literally now the engine driving what we're doing. And we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up heading into next year. You know, regardless what the season looks like, we'll be here covering it all for you. I can't thank you enough for your support. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks,
Have
Aaron.
a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
God bless.
Thank you.
Take it easy, guys.
Cheers.